You're listening to the Mind Over Finger podcast, episode number 28.
Welcome to the Mind Over Finger podcast, discussions on mindful music making, efficient practice, and building a purposeful career. And now, your host, Dr. Renee Paul Gauthier.
Hi, everyone. I hope you had a wonderful week. Before we go to the show, I want to thank all of you who took the time to reach out to me by sending me a text or a DM via Instagram or Facebook to let me know that you love the show. It's also been so wonderful to chat in person with those of you living in the Chicago area. Thank you so much for all of your kind words. They mean a lot to me, and it makes me extremely happy to read that so many of you find value and inspiration in my guest stories and insight. Thank you. And for those of you who have not done it yet, don't hesitate to drop me a note and let me know what you think. Or even take a screenshot when you like something while listening to the podcast, share it on Instagram, and tag me so I can say hello and know who you are and what you like. So now, let's get back to talking music. Last week, I spoke with Gerardo Ribeiro, violin professor at Northwestern University. We spoke about his experience studying with Ivan Galamian, how he uses mental practice, why it's important for us to listen attentively and assess critically what we're doing, and the importance of taking ownership of our learning experience. And today, I am so happy to bring you the incredible cellist Joshua Roman. Joshua is a multifaceted artist with a remarkably vibrant career. He's a soloist, chamber musician, composer, curator, artistic director, and philanthropist. He's earned an international reputation for his wide-ranging repertoire, his commitment to communicating the essence of music in visionary ways, his artistic leadership, and his versatility. As well as being a celebrated performer, Joshua is recognized as an accomplished composer and curator and was named a TED Senior Fellow in 2015. In this episode, we discuss practicing purposefully and building a meaningful career, and he tells us about the impact and mission of his popular Popper Etude Project and challenge. As you'll see, Joshua's journey and approach to music making are rooted in authenticity and a sense of purpose and are highly inspiring. And I know you'll find value and a source for a deeper reflection in this episode. Let's go to the show. Joshua Roman, thank you so much for being on the show today.
Of course, Renee. Thank you for having me.
Joshua, I first encountered you when you performed your own concerto with the Illinois Philharmonic a few years ago, and you came back to Chicago last September to perform the Mason-based concerto with the Elgin Symphony. And I loved both performances so much, and I'm so happy that we have a chance to talk today.
Me too. I've checked out some of the other episodes of the podcast, and of course, I'm obsessed with practicing. So thank you for having me on.
Joshua, you lead a very vibrant career as a soloist and a chamber musician, composer, curator, artistic director, and also philanthropist from what I've seen. And you embrace all genres from Bach to jazz and rock, and you're a champion of new music and a really engaging artist. And I would love for my listeners to get to know more about you. So I'll turn the mic to you. And I would love to hear about you and your musical journey and how this artistic path of yours has unfolded.
Sure, I'd love to share. I do a lot of different kinds of things, as you said, and it's interesting because it's a constant challenge for me to articulate in a way that other people understand that for me they're all part of the same package. Even though I do compose and I curate and I play different styles of music on the cello, it's all to me just part of being a complete musician from my perspective. And I think maybe that's the key, is that I've been lucky enough to have opportunities to bring out my own history and my own experiences in my career. I grew up in Oklahoma where I started playing when I was 3, but I studied with a violinist for the first 10 years, Lacey McClary, who was at the
Hmm.
time, he was the concertmaster of the Oklahoma City Philharmonic. And I played the cello. He would demonstrate on the violin. He was the big violin Suzuki teacher in town. And my parents had issues finding a cello teacher that they loved that would be willing to take a 3-year-old. There were plenty of them that would have taken me when I was older, but Lacey was up for an experiment. And so from the very beginning, from the very beginning of picking up the cello, it was a bit unorthodox. My path has been a bit unorthodox.
Hmm.
And it's not just about the learning of technique and classical music and lessons, but being pretty much the only one of my circle of friends who played the cello, or maybe even generally classical music. For the most part, I was the only one in my circle of friends who was a classical musician. So I learned very early on just to fit in with whatever was going on around me, because I wanted the cello to be a part of things. My friends were doing other things, so I just added the cello to the mix. Oklahoma, there's a lot of bluegrass, there's a lot of country music. I didn't do so much of that. I was definitely around it. But I did play a lot in bands on the cello and ultimately also on the guitar and the upright jazz bass. I played jazz for a while, and all sorts of different styles, which for me, again, was simply just a matter of engaging in the only way that I could. And it was very natural. And when I played the cello for people who weren't musicians, and I would play Bach or I would play whatever I was working on in the Suzuki books or later other stuff, it was the sort of thing that now might be done on purpose as an outreach event by a classical organization, a presenting organization. But when I was growing up, for me, it was just that was the performance opportunity. So I've been very comfortable and had a lot of exposure in regards to, again, like things that sometimes are called outreach or extra classical, outside of the classical box in a way. That's just been a part of my life. And I did go to conservatory. After I started studying with teachers who taught the cello, which was a fun change, by the way. That was interesting. Very different, but I still rely a lot on what my first teacher taught me. Yeah, I went to conservatory at 16. It was the Cleveland Institute of Music. I studied with the wonderful teacher Richard Aaron and Desmond Hobig as well, who was at the time the principal cellist of the Cleveland Orchestra. And for those 5 years, I kind of let go of a lot of the other things, not everything, but a lot of the other things that I had been doing in music, and really just focused on the classical repertoire. For the most part, it was just a classical repertoire. And then I got a job with the Seattle Symphony. I auditioned to be their principal cellist. I'd always wanted to be a soloist, but the path to that is unclear, especially when you come without a musical, like a strong musical network behind you, like I did. I had wonderful musicians coaching me, but not people with connections to help me with the solo career. And competitions would work for 3 years. I saw this with many of my friends and then stop. So I took another path. I became principal cellist of the Seattle Symphony. I was 22. It was really exciting. It seemed like a big deal. It was definitely a big deal to me. And the city was very receptive. The orchestra was very encouraging. And I started just immediately opening up again to anything that came my way. So I was playing in clubs, I was playing in bars, I was collaborating with a rock band, I was doing stuff in these sort of like roulette style theater nights, all sorts of crazy things in Seattle that were really just me tapping back into what my experience as a kid had been, but this time with more visibility and yeah, basically just with a higher profile than when I was a 6-year old or a 10-year old in Oklahoma. So anyway, it's been very interesting when I do all of these different things. That's how I see myself. I see myself as someone who plays the cello, has been passionate about the cello my entire life. When I think of the model that I follow, the best examples now, especially now that I compose and that I curate as well, it's really the old, I don't know if this is ironic or what, but it's the old traditional models of basically every composer you ever heard of until the 20th century, where they were essentially trained in all aspects of musicianship, and their careers were multifaceted, sometimes messy, very beautiful expressions of their identity through music built on the tradition of the people before them. They would incorporate the sounds of their time into their music. And so for me, I get a lot of inspiration when I look at that. And that's how I see myself, as trying to express things that touch me and the people that are around me and I'm living with in this time and in this space, that it's about us and not some sort of abstract thing, even though of course art is always also abstract.
That's so beautifully put. And it's fascinating to really see this unorthodox background really reflect in the career that you have today and see how it all comes together in this really beautiful tapestry. At least from the outside, it's very beautiful. So I hope it feels beautiful from the inside as well.
It does. I would say, I feel more and more connected. The challenge that I mentioned earlier is that a lot of people expect you to be one thing, right? That we specialize, and finding ways to articulate and to take on projects that demonstrate how it all fits together can be a challenge. I'll show up one place and collaborate with, like at TED, I'll collaborate with at a TED conference, I'll collaborate with a dancer and a singer and do some improv. And then I feel like I have to also play Bach. I mean, I always want to play Bach, but I feel like I almost immediately have to play Bach, just so you see, there's a lot more go. It's not just what you see right now, and vice versa. When people hear perhaps that I play Popper Etudes online, but don't realize that I also compose, or that I collaborate with the Jack Quartet or the actor Anna Devere Smith, trying to, as much as possible, figure out ways for people to see more, because I want other people to feel that freedom too, that, hey, if you love something and you have the skills of your instrument, you should use them in the ways that you love, not just the one way that you've focused on learning, but it's much more broad than that. You should follow your heart.
That is so true. I love that. And I'll open a parenthesis here to invite everyone listening to follow you on social media, on your Facebook
Mhm.
page and Instagram. And I saw that you also have a very active Patreon profile, because
Yes.
it's so much fun to follow you around the world. And you do provide so much value on those platforms. But to go back to what we were talking about, you seem to have been able to create something really fulfilling and meaningful and also impactful. So, can you talk to us a little bit about building that unique career that you've just mentioned? What's your advice, if you can expand even a little bit more on that, your advice to young musicians about building the career they dream of?
Yeah, so I do think about that a lot, and of course there are many aspects to building a career, especially these days when you've got a lot of freedom, which also means a lot of responsibility. It's not the same as it was 30 years ago, maybe even 20 years ago. There isn't, there's not a single moment of getting discovered. It's a lot of moments where you build upon what's come before. So the best sort of distillation of all of that I can think of is the idea that I started to see in my own career, which is that you get the career that you build.
Mm.
If you're after a crossover career, for example, then you kind of have to put it out there that you're a crossover artist. If you don't like doing recording sessions, but that's what you spend your time focusing on, then you're building the wrong career. I mean, and again, there are subtleties, there are nuances to this. There's a lot that goes into building a career, but the idea that you really focus on what you really want, and getting to understanding what that means, I think takes some soul searching and some exploration. It's not that you can't explore, you absolutely have to explore. And I think that a lot of people, again, like a lot of us, kind of play the music that we were taught to play without questioning why, or we don't play things that we love because they're not in the style that we learned. And I think that that's a little bit like we should move past that. We need to move past that. If you love listening to Radiohead or Lady Gaga, and your favorite thing in the world is to sing Lady Gaga or to like listen to Lady Gaga, then you should be able to play that on your instrument. And you should incorporate that love of that into what you do. And it doesn't have to be a huge part of it, but just to explore and say, hey, I've got this great skill here. I need to connect it with my passion. And the beautiful thing that happens is sometimes you find new opportunities for your career, but sometimes you also just find new ways of unlocking your own connection to phrasing and to emotion. Because when you really love a piece of music, no matter if it's a song you hear on the radio, a pop song, or an art song, or an opera, or Bach, solo Bach, whatever it is, the thing that you really, really love, when you play that, you feel, and you feel that special connection. That affects you in very important ways. And as a musician, you have to tap into that with everything that you play, to that care, that love for a note, that love for a phrase that you get when you play the music that you love the most. So as far as the career goes, you may not, that may not be the big thing that you do in your career, but looking at yourself and what makes you unique and what you love doing and what you think you'll still love doing in 10 years and 20 years, and focusing on that, which is for most people not quite as like focused and narrow as we generally treat ourselves. So there are, again, many things to a career, but I firmly believe that finding your voice and building your career around your voice is very important.
That's so true. And we're so impatient as well because it really takes a lot of time to explore all of these nuances that you mention
Right.
and to really discover exactly, to find this voice that you just mentioned. We get so impatient to see results, and it's very tempting to go down the easy road. And nowadays, with the technology that we have, I think that this young generation, everything is possible. Long gone are the days where you can only access presenters through a manager. Now, through an email, you can reach someone, and you send enough emails, you have a tour.
Right.
And with technology, you can post videos, produce albums, create podcasts, from the comfort of your home. Everything is so possible. And it's, I love what you're saying about finding your voice.
It's important. And I think the only other thing that I would add to go along kind of with what you were just saying, back to that notion of like a moment of luck. First of all, like I was saying earlier, that there, for almost no one does it actually work that way, where there's one moment of luck. It's a series of things that you build on. But then I think it's also important to think about what is luck. And this is a saying I'm sure some of you have heard. This man that's been very important to me in my life, as sort of, in a way, as a mentor, loves to say that luck is preparation meets opportunity. You have to have both. You have to be prepared when an opportunity comes along. If you're not, then it won't turn out to be what you wanted. And at the same time, you can prepare all you want, but you can't be bitter if you don't have opportunities come your way. And you can't control that. All you can control is being the being prepared for that opportunity, and maybe even sometimes being in the right place. And that's part of being prepared. Knowing what you want, knowing how to deliver it, and seeking out places where opportunity might strike. And that's how you create your own set of circumstances that we other people might look at and say that's luck.
That's really true. And if you feel comfortable, I would love to hear. But sometimes it's so hard to keep going when we are facing hardship or challenges or things get difficult. And if you feel comfortable, would you mind sharing with us maybe some of the challenges that you faced and overcame through the years?
Yeah, so challenges for me have taken they've come in different forms. I think that some of them are related. For example, I've had the challenge of simply just not having enough money.
Mm.
I come from a family that wasn't, you know, grew up in Oklahoma. It was wonderful. My Of the most loving parents. We didn't really have the kind of money where you could go out and buy an amazing instrument or a lot of the things that people in the position of a soloist or pursuing a musical career might have. So there were definitely times, especially when I was before I got my Seattle Symphony job, and even after I left it a little bit, where I would I would go to the grocery store and get like whatever food had the most calories per
Mm.
dollar, because that was how I could get by. And I just didn't have any money, and I was very used to that whole like being charged for not having money thing that banks do, and trying to in those moments stay optimistic about my chances. You know, I didn't always have, like I said before, I didn't always have the connections that network. I had people that believed in me, but most of the people that believed in me weren't like the connected people that could help elevate what I was doing. So staying focused on being prepared for those opportunities and finding ways to make opportunities was very difficult. And I don't know, the thing that I learned was really just to, and I don't know if this works for everybody, but it's really just to think about why does what I do matter and how much I believed in it and what else I could do that I would feel mattered, and really think deeply about that. And I would find the strength when I would find some sort of personal breakthrough. I would also find the strength to feel like, hey, this is something that someone else can also benefit from. If it's just for me, then I should do something else. Like whatever I can do, and I can do a lot of things. I can go get a like try to learn about other stuff, get a different kind of job. But if I really believe in what I'm doing and I feel myself being changed by that in a positive way, then I feel like I should share that. And that sort of experience, trying to find, in a sense, trying to marry the objective and the subjective, because I know we all love what we do. Well, maybe we don't, but I like to think that we all love what we do, but trying to figure out how to make those decisions about what to pursue, how much to sacrifice for that. Like the personal sacrifice involved in a musical career is often rather great. I think we can all think of things we've given up, of opportunities that we've given up outside of music, the money, the personal relationships. There are all sorts of things that you have to really consider. And when you do, and when you find that place of strength and belief in what you do, and then you start connecting to the people around you in a more positive way, and they can build you up and help you when you really believe in what you're doing. I don't know. That's kind of like a vague thing. I don't know if that helps anyone, but for me, that's one of the greatest challenges is believing that what I do is worth the sacrifice and that it matters.
Oh, that's fantastic. And I really appreciate you sharing this, Joshua, because I feel like so many people, and me included, can relate to these obstacles that you mentioned. And I hope it can encourage and inspire them to stay on course and keep going. And, talking about making a difference, I would love to hear about something that I think is so interesting and important, and that's the Popper Project and
Mm,
its most recent iteration, the Popper Challenge. So,
right.
can you please tell us more about that?
Sure. Well, to start with the Popper Project, David Popper, for those who aren't cellists, because every cellist knows, David Popper wrote 40 etudes, which are kind of like, I don't know, maybe there's the Bible of cello studying, but if you're not a cellist, you might not know them because we don't really perform them. They're not like the piano ones that are really concert pieces that are kind of also etudes. They're really, truly etudes. So these 40 etudes are things that cellists kind of suffer with in silence. We practice them and we play them on our lessons, and that's pretty much it. And so when I left the Seattle Symphony in 2008, I was I'd had a brief period of time where this was true before, but for the first time, I was looking ahead at my life. I was striking out on my solo career, and I was looking out ahead in my life and seeing that there was no future where I had weekly checkups. And I had never really thought of this before, but most of the time up until that point, I'd had like a lesson every week or a studio class or both, or with the orchestra, concerts with new rep. So there was this sense of regularity. There was a sense of this regularity around my practicing and weekly goals, not just big, general, vague goals like, hey, I'm going to get better at the cello. And when I play something sad, everyone will cry. Like, great. Um, but the weekly goals that I could work on, that was gone. And I had struggled with how to practice when I was the only person who was paying attention to whether or not I was progressing each week. So I challenged myself to start posting Popper Etudes. So all 40 etudes, initially I was doing them once every week, and I fell out of that once I actually got concerts going and got sick at the same time, or whatever. I didn't stick to the weekly schedule, but it was really a thing that I was doing to help myself practice for a weekly goal so that my practicing would be organized, not just around concerts, but around progress in my playing, and that I would have an accountability measure in there. And that was the posting online part. That if I posted these online, I knew that I would hold myself at least to some basic standard, because I wasn't going to put videos where I sounded really bad online. I did not realize how popular it would be. And I did not know what to do with the popularity of the Popper Project. It was, I don't know how many views it has now. Like a couple months ago, I checked, and the set of 40 etudes has over 1.2 million views,
Wow.
which is just, for etudes, mind boggling. So again, I didn't really know what to do with it when it was happening. I'd really just started it because I needed to practice better. And I was glad that other people were finding benefit from it. And I did encourage people to check it out once I realized it was helpful. And I thought a lot about how we cellists had never really come together around Popper etudes, as far as I could tell. And I think that that's a large part of why it attracted as much attention as it did. When the 10th anniversary, which is actually in March 2019, like just a few weeks ago, when the 10th anniversary of my first post, Popper Etude #1, started coming up, which I just sort of noticed incidentally, I thought, hey, I should actually really think more deeply about the attention that this project got and why. So I was thinking about the community of cellists who practice Popper etudes alone, and I was thinking about what posting these etudes had done for me, and I decided to create the Popper Challenge. So in 2019, the 10-year anniversary of when I started the Popper Project, I'm challenging all cellists, every cellist, to post themselves videos of themselves playing Popper etudes. I'm not challenging everyone to do all 40. That's kind of crazy. Although there are a few people who are taking it on, and I'm very happy for them. Like, I did it. I'm done. You go ahead. Uh, but people are posting Popper etudes, and I've created forums around the Popper Challenge on Facebook and Instagram and Twitter and Patreon, where this community is sharing the sort of hidden struggles and the hidden stories of progress in the cello. And it's something I think is really beautiful. I've had, I think the very first video was this girl from Oklahoma who posted herself playing, and her cat's in the video. It's very cute. And then I made the second or third video was Carter Bray, the principal cellist of the New York Philharmonic. And people from other countries have been doing it. I do an online masterclass once a month with people who have posted etudes, and we work on them. And those videos are also available on the Patreon. And we've got more stuff coming up. But basically, the challenge is to explore what it means to practice, because that's what etudes are all about. What do we do when we're sitting alone? How can we open that up and look just a little closer about what's really making a difference in our playing so that our music can be the most impactful?
Yeah, and they're such an important part of our evolution. And it's so hard to convince most students of that fact, you know. You don't have to convince me, but like for those who are still not believers, can you expand a little bit more on what you think the benefits of practicing etudes are? Like, why do we need to practice etudes at all?
Absolutely. And this is something that it's sort of the subtext of the Popper Challenge. And as the year progresses, will come more and more to the fore, I think. It's not just about playing these etudes well, like whatever, you learn some techniques. That's important. I think overall, when you're like the great thing about etudes, when you're doing them right, they help you figure out how to practice.
Mm.
When you're playing scales, when you're playing exercises, Shevchik, Czerny for pianists, whatever you're playing, you are building your technique. When you're working on a piece that you have to perform, hopefully what you're doing is not as much about technique. Hopefully what you're doing is about the music and you're preparing for a performance. You're practicing being in the moment. You're practicing execution, and execution is not just technique. It should never, that's not the point. Execution is about bringing the music to life. And there's something in between. And for me, that's etudes. Etudes are where you practice, how do I take a technique that I've been working on, a physical thing, and connect it to a musical idea so that when it happens, I'm not thinking about the technique. The technique becomes secondary, it becomes a part of the expression, which itself is a more pure musical character or idea or phrase. And if you use etudes as the place where you can practice how you practice, then when you're practicing Dvorak concerto or Tchaikovsky piano concerto or whatever you're practicing, you can spend more time focusing on the music. And I think you enjoy practicing better. And then ultimately, when you get on stage, you have built the habit of being present and musical rather than the habit of being worried about technique and fearful of making mistakes.
That's so greatly put. I love that they teach us to practice. It's so true. And it's like you said at the beginning, you know, sometimes we see them as just something you need to get through and something the teacher assigns, but it really is a means to an end. And the end is this expression, all of those emotions that we want to embody on our instruments and once on stage. One thing I love about this project and this challenge is what you were referring to earlier is this shared experience and this community. I think that's fantastic.
I think it's pretty easy when you spend a lot of time alone in a room practicing to forget that you're not alone and that a lot of the questions and experiences that you have are things that other people have gone through and may even be going through right that very moment. And I truly believe that the saying that a rising tide lifts all boats is true. So the more we can share what's helping us, the more we help each other, the better it is for all of us.
Yes. Have some of the participants shared some of the benefits that they've enjoyed from participating?
A little bit, yes. Ever since I started posting videos for the Popper Project, what has moved and surprised me the most has been the flood that to this day of notes from people that I know and that I don't know thanking me for posting those etudes and the encouragement that it's given them to continue. The gratitude moves me so much, and I want to expand on that and learn what lessons are being learned and how those can be shared with other people. And that has happened a little bit. I think that the so far the thing that was the most like oh moment for me, there's this guy in Ireland, this cellist who started learning the cello online in his mid 30s a few years ago. And so he was in the online master class that I did. It was the February class sometime in early March. And he played a Popper Etude for us in the online master class. And it was the first time he had ever played the cello for people live. Previous to that, he had posted a few videos, but this was his first time in real time performing for people. Even though it was online, it was such a big moment and so incredibly moving for him to have the bravery to do that. And he did so well. It was really exciting.
Hmm. That's exceptional. Again, shared experience.
Right.
And like you mentioned, this having the accountability and the exercise of setting goals, are there some other takeaways that are very meaningful for you in regards to your own playing from participating in this challenge?
Yes, there were so many lessons that I learned when I did the Popper project, when I posted all 40 of those etudes. It's hard to remember all some of them I think I just absorbed and forgot where they came from. And some of them, of course, were reminders of things, as often happens. There were reminders of things I'd heard from teachers before. But the thing that was fascinating that I do remember was how the recording process started being a very helpful tool in my playing. And I remember the first time I started really thinking about the difference that it made. I would hit record and give myself a time limit. I would say 30 minutes. I can play this etude over as many times as I want. I can't do any editing. I never did any editing. I don't know how, first of all, but yeah, especially with video, I don't know how I would have done that. So I had to have a good take. And so I would give myself a 30-minute time limit and I would play it over and over again. And as soon as I figured out that I had to not care in the moment, I had to not care about how I was playing, and I had to really focus on the musical line, it became this sort of intense 30-minute game. And almost without fail, I started to notice that I would always choose the take where, when I had been playing, I had been the most focused on the phrase and not thought about messing up, not thought about my fingers, not thought about lunch, whatever, where I'd been the most present. That was the take that was also the most in tune, where the technique was coming through and I wasn't even thinking about it. And that to me was an interesting discovery. And so I really started to think about that in terms of a little bit of gamification of like, how can I see the results of what I put my focus in? And I learned a lot from that.
Hmm. That's fantastic. And you were just talking about the benefits of recording yourself, but can you lift the curtain for us a little bit more on what that process is for you in the practice room? How do you maximize results?
Absolutely. I used to be one of those that just sort of counted how long I practiced. And of course, I measured that I got better, but I didn't necessarily walk into the practice room with a specific goal. And that is the number one thing that has changed my practicing for the better, is walking into the practice room not just with a vague, hey, I'm going to get better at the cello because I'm going to practice, but instead saying, I need to work on such and such today, whether it's a passage, whether it's a concept like what I'm thinking about while I'm playing, or whether it's I've noticed that my elbow is not moving in the way that it should, that there's a goal and a a desirable outcome that I can look back on at the end of a practice session and say, hey, I made progress towards that or not. And that's not to say that the progress is always immediate or that it sticks right away, but no longer am I practicing for 8 hours and most of the time just sort of moving my arms and going through things. I think that focus practice is so much better. The you know it's something that we have less. We spend so much time consuming that it doesn't it doesn't breed in us the desire or the instinct to account for our time. And time is the biggest resource that you have. It's the best resource that you have. It's also the most precious. And so understanding your time and using your time, even if it's for exploration, make it purposeful.
Mm,
Purposeful. So
that's a great word for that. Joshua, it's hard for me to stop here because we focus mostly on the cello, and there's so much more about you. So I really hope that the listeners will find you online and explore the other facets of your career, because there are many. As I mentioned earlier, you compose, you curate, you have TED Talks, and so many more wonderful projects that you partake in. But how about a round of rapid fire questions before I let you go?
sure, let's do it.
So we've talked a little bit about building a dream career, but for people who look at everything that you do and want to do something that resemble that, can you talk to us about a little bit about what your life looks like?
Life is life is messy. Life is beautiful. I think trying to just think about what you care about the most in life and the people that you care about the most in life, and organizing it around that. Don't let yourself get caught. I try not to let myself get caught spending a lot of time doing things that I just don't care about. But the people and the impact, those that you love, as long as that is in the center, I think the mess sort of sorts itself out and becomes a beautiful representation of you.
Mm. Well put. What skills do you think young musicians studying today should acquire in addition to learning to play their instruments?
I think that the skill of communication is something that is really sort of sorely lacking right now. When I listen to interviews of musicians from the 60s, every single one of them sounds more intelligent than like most people, like the most intelligent people that you think of today. Even the Beatles, just whatever they were the rebels. But if you listen to the interviews of people who really thought about what they were saying, even if they were being controversial or causing trouble, they were so articulate. And I think that that's half the battle. You have to be able to talk about what you're doing, which means that you have to be able to think about what you're doing. So, thinking about communication, how you present to people so that you can be most effective and that they will actually see you, is very important.
Mm. Is there a performance that has stayed with you throughout the years and why?
There are a few. The first time I played in Carnegie Hall, um, just it was a big moment. It was for the YouTube Symphony. I was playing solo Bach, and just sort of looking myself in the mirror. The sound in there is unbelievable, especially for solo cello. Looking myself in the mirror beforehand, with all of the attention sort of swirling around the event, all the big names and big companies, and just looking in the mirror and cutting through all of that and saying, hey, people love music. They don't love music because it's a contest. They love music because it moves them. I'm here because I love music. I'm going to think about what I love about this piece and do my best to communicate that and not worry about anything else. The opportunity, the pressure, the idea that I could make a mistake. I'm just going to think about what I love about the music. And that's the sort of thing we always sort of try to think about, but in those moments to be able to center and say that I've carried that with me for a long time.
That's beautiful. How about a favorite tool in the practice room?
Airplane mode.
That's a really good one,
That's
actually.
it. Airplane mode. Put your phone in airplane mode. That's it. Just do it. I mean, there are many tools, but that is where it starts. Airplane mode. You are practicing. Give yourself the attention you deserve.
Do you have a favorite book that you would recommend to our listeners?
Oh man, books. I'm reading two right now that I would not recommend, and I'm considering putting down. I Yeah, I really loved. Sorry, I had it, and I didn't write it down. I should have written down. It's about the inner game of tennis. I would recommend the inner game of tennis. The inner game of tennis is a beautiful book about basically the psychology of performance, and it's not everything about passion, but it's a lot about how you organize your thoughts, and it's applicable to so many things, especially music. So the inner game of tennis.
Mm, a good one. What is a piece of advice that was given to you that you would like to pass on to the listeners?
Well, I think I hear from a lot of people different versions of follow your passion, and I think that that's you really have to think about what that means. And I think for me, what that means is not that whatever you're totally in love with at the moment is what you should do. I think what that means is you have to really think about what you want to give in life, what you're most passionate about giving, what you have the energy to do, and build around that. 10 years later, 20 years later, set yourself up so that you can still find joy and passion in what you do. And if you're doing something where you don't find that, if you're just burnt out, you can take a break. But if it's because you don't really, your life is about something else and it's misaligned, then maybe you need to find something that you care about enough that you're willing to make sacrifices for it and be happy.
That's a great advice. And Joshua, do you have a quick actionable tip that the listeners could implement today in their musical lives?
Yes, I would challenge everyone listening to treat their own time as valuable, to minimize distractions when you're doing what you're focused on, and to set yourself up for success by planning your time. That doesn't mean that you have to do it exactly how you set, but we don't want to waste other people's time. Why would you waste your own? So treat yourself with your own time with the respect that you deserve.
And airplane mode.
Yeah, that's part of it. Absolutely. Minimize distractions. Airplane mode all the way.
Joshua, what do the months ahead look like for you?
The months ahead have a beautiful mix of concertos. I'm playing my favorite 20th century concerto by Lutoslawski in Jacksonville, and a beautiful concerto by my friend Mason Bates actually this weekend, and a few other concerto performances, some chamber music. I'll be in Spoleto again in Charleston, Spoleto, USA. And then this summer is usually, and this year is no exception, a mix of chamber music in really beautiful places, and sort of catching up and planning for next season. And of course, lots of things online on my Patreon account where I'm creating tracks and sharing them, and lots of content, and social media where I'm posting silly photos and other stuff. More than that, but.
And where can people find you? I'll put all of this in the show notes. You've mentioned your Patreon account. Can you give us the name of your handles?
Yes. So on Patreon, I'm Joshua Roman. And you can also find that by going to joshuaroman.com/patron or joshuaroman.com/Patreon. That's Patreon. That'll take you to that page. On Facebook and Instagram, you can find me at Joshua Roman Cello. And on Twitter, I'm at Joshua_cello.
I really hope that the listeners will pop on the internet and check you out. Are there any final thoughts before we come to a close on this conversation?
Well, Renee, I want to thank you. I think that it's a very valuable resource. I hope that your listeners check out the other podcast episodes, as well, of course, as checking out my social media and my Patreon. But not only listen, but engage. This is, it's why I'm interested in what I'm interested right now is how can we engage and not just consume. And I think that your podcast has a lot of very valuable tools for us to use, and we can go forth and use music to move people and help people connect with their shared humanity.
Oh, Joshua, thank you so much for that. I feel so
Thank you.
inspired by our conversation, and thank you so much for sharing your passion and your insight with me and my listeners today.
Of course. Thank you.
Thank you guys so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed this chat with cellist Joshua Roman. As I said in the intro, find me on social media to let me know what you think about this episode. I'm Mind Over Finger on all platforms. And join the Mind Over Finger tribe at facebook.com/groups/Mind Over Finger tribe for more information and discussions on how to take your practice to the next level and enjoy the process. As always, you can find the show notes for this episode and past episodes of the show at mindoverfinger.com. And don't forget to check out Joshua's activities on social media and at joshuaroman.com. Next week, I'll be talking to pianist Jamie Parker about all things mindful practice. Jamie knows a lot about that, and you don't want to miss our conversation. And if you would do me a favor, please head over to iTunes to rate and leave a review. It's very much appreciated, and it helps other people find out about the show. Again, thank you, and a bientôt.